Hi, my name is Liz Ritteman. I'm the Social and Digital Marketing Manager at Nine Health Fair, and we're on a quest to find out where health happens, because it happens everywhere, whether we choose it to or not. Good things happen, bad things happen, and everybody experiences health in different ways in different places. And so with our weekly Health Happens Facebook Live show, we're exploring all those ways that people experience health. And today we're talking to the Denver Metro YMCA about their diabetes prevention program. We have Tammy Dickerson with us. She's with the YMCA, and she is a healthy lifestyle coach for the DPP program. And we also have Chris Jones, and Chris Jones has successfully completed the program, and he can talk about his experience. So, Tammy, first of all, how might somebody know if they're at risk for developing type 2 diabetes?
Well, there are a couple ways, and the ways that we look at that is, or how they qualify for the program is, fortunately, we've been able to pair with Nine Health Fair, which greatly impacts lives. But we look at if a person is 18 years or older, if their BMI is 25 or greater, and then the final decision is if their doctor has told them they are pre-diabetic. We do A1Cs to see where their range is, or they can qualify according to a risk assessment, and then we know if they're at risk for diabetes.
Okay, and Chris, for you, how did you first hear about the program?
Actually, my wife read an article in Time Magazine, January of 2016, that was a feature, and it talked and praised the YMCA's program, which it pointed out was in 43 states at that time. And knowing that I was at risk and didn't know what turn to take, we contacted the closest YMCA just to see if there was a program starting, and it was very fortunate, yes, there was. And it was nearby, and it was the program that Tammy was leading at the time. So it was fortuitous that the timing was perfect.
Right, and so Tammy was your healthy lifestyle coach.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was so blessed because he's a prize student. He did such a great job.
So let's talk a little bit about the program itself. And this program is funded by the CDC, right?
Well, there's lots of ways that the program can be funded. One, you can self-pay. It's a $429 program. It's a year-long program, so very affordable. Some insurances pay for it, and some employers will pay for it for their employees, which is really an incredible benefit.
Yes.
And, of course, we have grant funding, like you mentioned.
Okay. And Chris, when you first heard about this program, what were your thoughts? Because, it's, and we'll get into this in a little bit more, but it's a very intense program.
Right, but frankly, I was willing to find a program that I was willing to try and give it my best shot. I knew I had to do something because I was in the risk category. I had not had to, prior in earlier life, worry about it at all, although certainly there was a history of it in my family. And my family physician had pointed out that I was in the dangerous zone, and my blood glucose levels and my A1Cs were in that risk category. My family physician wanted to prescribe medications. I said, hold off, and I said, I want to try this program, and he agreed. And I just decided, well, it was a great opportunity, but I really had to commit myself to it and be determined that I was going to make it work.
All right. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're here with the YMCA DPP Healthy Lifestyle Coach, Tammy Dickerson, and Chris Jones, who is a participant of the Diabetes Prevention Program. And so if you are maybe at risk of developing diabetes, this might be a great program to help you kind of turn things around before you actually do develop diabetes. And you can, I've got my phone here, so I'm looking for your questions. So if you have any questions about diabetes or about the program, please feel free to just ask, and I'll read your questions out loud, and either Tammy or Chris can answer them for you. So, Tammy, let's start with you. You brought some materials with you. What does a typical class look like?
Our class really is designed to be a support group, and as a healthy lifestyle coach, we deliver the information and we facilitate the class. This was designed by the National Institute of Health and approved by the CDC. And so in class one, our participants, after they've qualified, they would receive a folder with a session. And we have 2 goals. We reduce our weight by 7%, and we increase our activity to 150 minutes. And the program walks you step by step with what that looks like and how to accomplish those. So we start out with a little chart on our weight and how to keep track of that, because that's one of our goals. Even though this is not a diet, we don't want to start it and end it. This is a lifestyle change, which is what we learn. We learn what that amount of weight loss is to hit 7%. And we track. And some of you are familiar with this, but we track our fat grams. Chris, do you remember why we track our fat grams? We'll put him to the test.
Well, the premise behind the program is reduction of fats as one of the prime methods of controlling the diabetes tendencies. And when I've mentioned that to colleagues who have tried other programs, they keep saying, "Well, what about carbs?" And what, you know, and I say, "No, we're not bothering with carbs. It's primarily the fat gram count, and secondly, it's a calorie count." And that's really all I relied on, starting with fat grams, and then I moved it up to the next notch, which was sort of balancing, because I found I was able to have more calories per day than what the guides would have otherwise suggested, but I knew I was on the right path because I was steadily losing and achieving the goal and the range I needed to be in. So I balanced both, which was starting with fats and then going into calories.
Yeah. So let me ask you, a lot of times, I think, at least for me, the hardest part to watch what I eat is when I am in a social setting, when I'm out with friends. You know, does the program help you, you know, handle those situations? Or like, how did you handle this? I mean, maybe it's not hard for you. I know for me,
tell them about Inga. If you tell them about your wife, then she'll know how successful you've been.
Well, I was tested frequently. We did attend any number of social engagements of all kinds in that year's time. And yes, there were lots of opportunities for food and drink. And I had one strategy that I adopted very quickly, which is to cruise by the hors d'oeuvres and the food table, take a very brief look, decide, because of course Tammy had been coaching us all along, what to stay away from, to be mindful of. But basically, if I found nothing, I just walked away from it. And basically, I would get a soda or just water, and then I would tend to socialize away from that table. And essentially, it worked for me, but it took discipline. But yes, there were many tests.
Okay. So Tammy, you know, what is kind of one of the biggest things somebody can expect after going through the program? Is it the weight loss? Is it maybe a change in habits? Like, what would you say, and Chris, you can answer this too, what is the biggest takeaways that you typically see, and what was the biggest thing for you?
Well, fortunately, I've been coaching for several years, and I've seen lots of people begin and go through the program and complete the program. And I think what's really makes my heart happy is that it's a lifestyle change. In this class, the information is very basic and very foundational, but it's hard work. And it's a commitment, because if being healthy was easy and maintaining a healthy weight was easy, we would all be thin. And it's not easy, and we know that. And so this program teaches and facilitates and gives information, and the participants go home and implement it and practice it, and they come back to their support group. And it's a very safe environment, and then they learn and they grow. And the hopes is that when we get to session 25 after a year, is that this has become a habit. That no longer do they have to think about how many fat grams is in that, and what does my plate look like, and how am I going to problem solve on this, and how am I going to stop these negative thoughts, and what am I going to do because I'm going out to dinner tonight. So how am I going to handle this situation? So hopefully by the end of a year, they have great skills to continue on and make it part of their life.
And Chris, what about for you? What results did you see, you know?
Well, I grew up, or as I got older, I was lured into that false sense of security that I could eat like I always did as a teenager, with no ill results, until one day I realized that I was at the maximum weight, and I had all of these markers that were not good, needed to change. And I have to admit, if you've never had to apply a discipline to what you eat, how much you eat, and in the past, if you've always been able to eat with almost abandon, and now all of a sudden you have to be careful, and now you do have to be mindful, and you do have to care about what is the quantity and what's the content and how much fat and calorie. I would have to admit it's difficult, but I realized that if I was to not change, it was almost a disaster. And I did not want diabetes, which had been the case with my both sides of my family. And I realized it was up to me. And I think the one thing my takeaway from this is, yes, you can, no matter how much, if you've ever had to practice good nutrition or careful eating strategies, it is possible, even if you're starting later, like I did, and you've never had to try anything before. So it does work, and I think that's my takeaway, is that I really am a believer that if you adhere to certain principles, and they're not difficult or demanding, but if you stick with them and make them yours for the rest of your life, it's very easy to convert those dietary and nutritional habits, and they'll support you for the rest of your life.
So again, we are talking about the Diabetes Prevention Program, and it is offered through the YMCA. And Tammy, why don't you tell us a little bit, because it's not just showing up to class. Why don't you tell us about the program? It's a year-long program. What all is involved when you sign up to commit? This is what you're committing to.
That's, I kind of have a heart-to-heart with everybody in the beginning, because it is a commitment. And I know a lot of us have started programs, and let's get healthy, and let's do this, and make a difference in our life, and then somehow they fall off and don't continue. So as coaches and facilitators, we try to encourage and motivate people to come to class. We meet for 16 one-hour weekly sessions, and then we transition into monthly to complete a year. And in the first class, no one speaks because it's a new environment and it's a little scary and no one knows anyone. And by class 25, no one will shut up. So you really create a bond in the class. And the motivation is really they learn. Everybody is facing in the same direction, traveling the same path, but at their own rate. And so some people jump in with 2 feet and hit all their goals right away and make 2 or 3 goals. Some people, it might not kick in till session 7. So we give all of the information and all of the supplies to encourage them to be very successful. In session 5, all the participants receive a YMCA membership.
That's pretty awesome.
Which is incredible. And as long as you're coming to class and doing your part, people are very successful. And all the people in my class, like Chris, that are mindful on what they're eating, that are tracking their fat grams. And the reason we chose fat grams is there are more calories per gram of fat than the other macronutrients, than the carbohydrates and the proteins. So that's why we focus on that. But as they go through the program, they find success and they find motivation and they find support all along the way.
So again, if you guys have questions about diabetes or the Diabetes Prevention Program, don't hesitate to ask. Again, I'm with my phone and I'm looking for your questions, so feel free to ask questions. Chris, it can be really hard to commit yourself to something like this, to know like, oh man, I'm really going to have to, if I do this program, I'm going to have to change my ways. What would you say for you was the biggest factor that, I know you said it runs in your family, but what for you was probably the #1 reason that you're like, you know what, for this, I have to do this?
Well, I had had other complicating medical issues. I had been diagnosed with MS in 2009, and one of the other fears, so to speak, was always my caregivers, who always would preach that, you know, you don't need a second morbidity factor. And whenever I would take symposiums with the MS community, they would line out all of the culprits. You don't need high blood pressure, you don't need diabetes, you don't need all of these other illness, chronic situations that would just further complicate the MS condition. And I think that was almost like that little bird sitting on my shoulder all the time, reminding me that, okay, you've got one issue that's chronic, but you don't need another one, and you have the opportunity to prevent it. And I think that was a huge motivator. For me, the other thing is the fact that Tammy gave us fantastic little clues and little habits that we could all adopt. I remember in one session she put a deck of cards, just a deck of playing cards on the table. And she said, here's your steak for tonight. And then, you know, using the illustration that, okay, that's 3 ounce or 4 ounce or whatever, and it's kind of like, forget what they said on the menu about that 8 or 10 or 12 ounce steak. This is it for you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you, in doing it that way, will push away from the table hungry. Because one of the comments Tammy reinforced was that the essence of the program is not to starve yourself. You always have to feel full, and you always have to feel content, but you have to learn how to substitute for what you've been used to and what you've been conditioned to eat. And for me, for 50 to 60 years. And it can be done. You really have to practice some of those little tricks of the trade, but they do work. And one of the things I think that helped me a great deal is I've always loved salads. And one of the things Tammy emphasized was that you're always smarter if you plan your meals ahead. And if you, instead of not and running out and deciding, I'm hungry now, what do? Let's go out and get fast food. If you plan a little bit ahead to make sure you've got enough and prepared with enough quantity that it will carry you through those periods when all of a sudden you're tired. You don't really want to prepare something at home, but you do have something there that you can rely on that is healthy and will fill you up. When
you go out, do you have places in mind that you're like, I know this place has healthy food, I'm going to try to go to this place? Or, you know, are there certain types of foods that you look for on a menu when you're eating out?
Yes and no. You know, I would have to say that I'm probably not unlike other families where, because I wanted to stay within a dietary structure, that's not to say that the rest of the family wanted to. Right. And the bottom line is what I learned to do was make the healthier choices, or I would learn to do what Tammy would coach us to do, which is to just simply cut that meal in half and ask for a take-home box. Or to make sure that you scan that menu and you ask questions of the waitstaff. And I was not accustomed to doing that in the past, but what I found is it sometimes took them by surprise, but often they would provide you the answers in terms of if they didn't have it on the menu, what was the sodium or the fat or the content of those dishes. And often then I would ask them to substitute things. My wife and I still like to go out to Mexican restaurants, but often they'll want to give you the rice and the beans. We often ask, can we substitute a salad for that? I'll often do that, and then instead of saying, well, put the dressing on the salad, I'll say, put it on the side. And I've now learned I almost don't even touch the salad dressing. I like the salad for the contents.
Oh, I wish I could be that way. I wish I could be that way.
It took some adjusting, but I had to practice lots of techniques along the way and make them mine, so that it's what I'll practice from now on.
And so how has your life as a whole changed since participating in this program?
I feel more relief that I've moved my condition out of the more risk range for lipids and for blood sugar. My A1C, and Tammy had tested me at this year's 9 Health Fair, and I'm now at 5.5. And before, and when the doctor had forewarned me that maybe I was getting into the risk category, I was at 6 and over. which is when he was sounding the alarms and we were starting to talk about, well, maybe medications and so forth were necessary. And I'm so happy that my wife found that article, but that we decided to pursue it, that it was good timing, that I found Tammy, because she is a magnificent leader.
Thank you.
And mentor.
And I take it your wife did this with you, right?
She was a support, and she was very much behind my making this evolution, this change.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really have to commend the Y and their program leaders for, and Tammy in particular, is their support they give you in that program. Tammy would honestly scan each of our weekly trackers to, in a sense, find out what patterns of food habits we were in, and in a sense, how much of any of those types of foods. And then she would, because of her background with nutrition and her skill with that, she would work with each of us individually, because she'd get to know us in terms of our habits. And then she would give us extra little bits of help in terms of, you're doing great. She was very supportive, always supportive, but then she would also help us in terms of adjusting. One of the things that I learned to do, and it was a protein substitute, is introduce seeds into a lot of foods that I cook, even if it's oatmeal or grits or something like that, but to actually boost the protein.
That's a great
with the aid of seeds. And once again, Tammy was so knowledgeable, it made it easy. I didn't have to be a researcher.
Right.
And scan lots of documents to try to find that information. So
that's great. All right, well, thank you guys so much for coming here today.
Thank you,
again, you know, this post will be up for a while, so even after this Facebook Live is over, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them, and we'll definitely get back to you later. So thank you so much, and thank you, you guys.